I have just bought a Bugatti Veyron with a small issue. I'll be honest, a Bugatti was never on my dream car list.
This is what nobody tells you about building in silence. Matt Armstrong spent years rebuilding supercars. Most people write off Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens, restoring them from salvage titles with no factory support, no corporate backing, just skill, persistence, and a camera documenting every step. Millions watched him bring dead machines back to life. The manufacturers behind those cars? They stayed silent. Until one day, a package arrived from Sweden. Koenigsegg, a handwritten note, a message of respect from one of the most exclusive hypercar brands in the world. No marketing angle, no announcement, just recognition. And that raises a question bigger than cars. What does it mean when the people who never noticed you suddenly decide you were worth watching all along? The silence that made him famous. Matt Armstrong started his YouTube channel the way most creators start theirs. With no audience, no budget, and no guarantee that anyone would care. He was a young car enthusiast from the north of England who loved supercars but could not afford to buy one at retail price. So he found another way. He began purchasing damaged, written off, and salvage title vehicles from auction houses, often for a fraction of their intact value, and documenting the process of rebuilding them from scratch. The content was raw in the early days. The production quality was basic, the audience was small, but the substance was real because what Armstrong was doing on camera was genuinely difficult, genuinely risky, and genuinely fascinating. Rebuilding a supercar is not the same as fixing a regular car. These are machines with bespoke components, proprietary software systems, and engineering tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. A Lamborghini Huracan's V10 engine is not something you can repair with a Haynes manual and a socket set. A Ferrari's electronic system is locked behind manufacturer software that is not available to independent mechanics. The parts are expensive, often obscenely so. A single carbon fiber body panel for a McLaren can cost more than a decent used car. And the manufacturers, far from supporting independent repairs, actively resist them. They restrict parts access. They lock diagnostic software behind dealer-only firewalls. They design their cars to be serviced exclusively within their own authorized networks, at their own prices, on their own terms. Armstrong worked around all of it. He sourced parts from breakers and dismantlers across Europe. He found independent specialists.
Now, I've heard a lot of things about cars which go to Dubai, and apparently the ones which are built for Dubai,
who could code the software that the manufacturers refused to share. He fabricated components when the originals were unavailable or unaffordable. He made mistakes, documented them honestly, fixed them on camera, and showed his audience what the process actually looks like when you are not working with the safety net of a factory warranty and a manufacturer's blessing. The audience grew because the content was authentic in a way that polished manufacturer marketing videos never are. People watched because Matt Armstrong was doing the thing that the manufacturers said could not be done, and he was doing it with his hands, his stubbornness, and his willingness to learn in public. And the brands whose cars he was saving from the scrapyard said nothing. Lamborghini did not reach out. Ferrari did not reach out. McLaren did not reach out. The silence was not passive. It was a choice. These brands invest hundreds of millions of dollars in controlling their image, their narrative, and the perception of their products. An independent creator on YouTube proving that their cars can be rebuilt outside of the authorized network is, from a corporate perspective, a threat to the exclusivity that justifies their pricing. They did not want to acknowledge Armstrong because acknowledging him meant acknowledging that the factory is not the only place where their cars can be fixed. And that acknowledgement undermines the entire economic model of the luxury automotive aftermarket. Imagine putting years of your life into something, building a skill set that fewer than a handful of people on the planet possess, documenting it with transparency and honesty for millions of viewers, and hearing nothing back from the very companies whose products you are resurrecting. Not a thank you, not a partnership offer, not even a cease and desist, which would at least confirm that they were paying attention. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you wonder whether the work matters to anyone outside of the audience watching it. The package that changed everything. The Koenigsegg package arrived without warning. There was no prior communication, no email chain, no collaboration discussion, no agent reaching out to schedule a call. It simply showed up at Armstrong's workshop one day, a box from Ängelholm, Sweden, addressed to him personally. Inside was a collection of Koenigsegg branded merchandise, hoodies, clothing, and items from the company's exclusive collection, the kind of gear that is typically reserved for owners, employees, and a very small circle of people associated with the brand. These were not the generic promotional items that companies send to influencers by the truckload. Chosen with the kind of intentionality that suggests someone at Koenigsegg had been watching Armstrong's content and had decided, based on what they saw, that he deserved to be recognized. And then there was the note. Handwritten, not printed on corporate letterhead, by a marketing intern, written by hand, by someone who had taken the time to sit down and compose a personal message to a YouTuber who had never featured their brand, never rebuilt their cars, and never had any professional relationship with their company. The note acknowledged Armstrong's work. It expressed respect for what he was doing, and it communicated something that no other manufacturer had ever communicated to him in any form. We are paying attention, and we think what you do matters.
I think I can rebuild and fix this car within 24 hours.
That distinction is the entire story. Because in the automotive world, attention from a manufacturer is not just a compliment, it is a currency. It is the thing that determines who gets access, who gets parts, who gets invited to launches, who gets treated as a legitimate member of the automotive community rather than an outsider who happens to own a camera. For years, Armstrong had been doing work that was objectively remarkable, rebuilding machines of extraordinary complexity with extraordinary skill, and the industry had treated him as invisible. And then, the one brand he had never worked with, the one that had no commercial reason to notice him, was the one that said, "We see you." Armstrong's reaction on camera was understated in the way that genuine emotion often is. He did not perform surprise. He did not exaggerate the moment for content. He held the note, read it, and you could see something shift in his face. The recognition of being valued by someone you respect. The quiet validation that comes from doing the work for years and finally having someone in a position of authority confirm that the work was seen. It was one of the most human moments in the history of his channel, and it happened because a Swedish hypercar company decided to do something that Ferrari, Lamborghini, and McLaren had never bothered to do: send a package and write a note. The Bugatti effect when brands build walls. To understand why the Koenigsegg package was so significant, you have to understand how the rest of the luxury automotive industry operates, because the contrast is what makes the gesture extraordinary. The most exclusive automotive brands in the world do not just sell cars, they sell control. control over who drives them, who services them, who repairs them, and who is allowed to talk about them publicly. Ferrari maintains a blacklist of owners who have been deemed to have violated the brand's image standards. In 2014, the electronic music producer deadmau5 customized his Ferrari 458 with a vinyl wrap that replaced the Ferrari badges with a parody logo he called Ferrari. Ferrari's legal team sent him a cease and desist letter, and he was reportedly told that future purchases from the brand would not be available to him. A man who owned a car that cost $250,000 was told he could not modify it in a way that the manufacturer disapproved of. That is not a customer relationship. That is a licensing arrangement disguised as ownership. Bugatti's approach to the Chiron rebuild that Armstrong undertook demonstrated the same philosophy at an even more extreme level. When Alex Gonzalez crashed his Chiron Per Sport and attempted to rebuild it independently, Bugatti locked the car's VIN, preventing any dealership on Earth from selling official parts for that specific vehicle. They blacklisted the car from their global supply chain. The message was unmistakable. If you do not repair this car through us, at our price, on our terms, then this car does not get repaired. Armstrong and Gonzalez rebuilt it anyway.
Motorsport keyring on the GTR, which is a company which modifies GTRs.
Splitting the chassis with a garbage bin wheelbase and fabricating parts through 3D scanning and CNC machining. But the resistance they faced from the manufacturer was real, sustained. This is the environment that creators like Armstrong operate in. An industry that spends hundreds of millions on marketing, on brand image, on the perception of exclusivity, and that views independent creators not as allies, but as threats. The YouTube mechanic who proves that a Ferrari can be rebuilt without the factory is undermining the narrative that justifies the factory's pricing. The content creator who documents a Bugatti repair is exposing the gap between what the manufacturer charges for parts and what those parts actually cost. The transparency that makes YouTube content valuable is the exact thing that luxury brands are designed to prevent. Koenigsegg thinks differently. Christian von Koenigsegg founded his company in 1,994 inches, a converted fighter jet hangar in southern Sweden. He was 22 years old. He had no formal automotive engineering degree. He had a vision for what a hypercar could be, and the stubbornness to pursue it despite every institutional barrier the industry placed in his path. The established manufacturers dismissed him. Suppliers refused to work with a startup with no track record. The Swedish automotive establishment, dominated by Volvo and Saab, did not take him seriously. He built the company anyway, one car at a time, one problem at a time, one innovation at a time. That origin story matters because it explains why Koenigsegg operates so differently from its competitors. Christian von Koenigsegg is, in many ways, the automotive equivalent of Matt Armstrong. He is an outsider who proved that the establishment's gatekeeping was not about capability. It was about control. The same industry that told Armstrong his rebuilds were impossible told von Koenigsegg his company was impossible. Both of them built the thing anyway. And that shared DNA, the DNA of the person who does the work, regardless of whether the institution approves, is what makes the connection between Koenigsegg and Armstrong feel authentic rather than transactional. Koenigsegg's engineering philosophy is built on transparency in a way that no other hypercar manufacturer matches. Von Koenigsegg.
It's the fastest accelerating production car to 400 kilometers per hour. It's a new type of hybrid which is much more efficient.
Regularly appears on YouTube channels, explaining the technology behind his cars in detail, that would make most manufacturers' legal departments break out in hives. He has described the free-valve camless engine technology on camera. He has walked through the engineering of the Jesko Absolute's aerodynamics. He has explained the light-speed transmission's design principles to a general audience. He does this because he believes that engineering excellence should be visible, not hidden, that the work speaks for itself, that showing people how something is built does not diminish its value but increases it. That philosophy is why Koenigsegg noticed Matt Armstrong, because Armstrong operates on the same principle. His entire channel is built on showing the work, not the finished product. The work, the failures, the mistakes, the problem-solving, the moments where something goes wrong and you have to figure it out in real time. Armstrong does not hide behind polished marketing. He shows you the grease, the confusion, the research, and the satisfaction of making something work that was not supposed to work. That transparency is what Koenigsegg recognized, not the subscriber count, not the view numbers, the integrity of the process. A company that builds every car by hand and shows you exactly how they do it, recognized a creator who rebuilds every car by hand and shows you exactly how he does it. The alignment was not manufactured by a marketing department. It was organic, and that is why it resonated, from gatekeepers to view counts. The Koenigsegg package is not just a feel-good story about a nice company sending a gift to a hard-working creator. It is a signal that the relationship between automotive manufacturers and the people who talk about their cars is undergoing a fundamental transformation, and that the brands who understand this transformation will thrive, while the brands who resist it will become increasingly irrelevant to the audience that matters most. For decades, the automotive industry controlled its narrative through a small number of gatekeepers. Automotive journalists at established publications received press cars, attended manufacturer events, and wrote reviews that were shaped to varying degrees by the access that the manufacturers provided. The system worked because the journalists needed the access and the manufacturers needed the coverage. It was a mutually dependent relationship that produced content that was generally positive, occasionally critical, and almost always filtered through the institutional lens of a publication that had its own relationships to maintain. YouTube destroyed that model. Not gradually, catastrophically. Creators like Matt Armstrong, who have no institutional affiliation and no dependency on manufacturer access, produce content that is more trusted, more watched, and more influential than anything the traditional automotive press generates. Armstrong's Bugatti Rebuild series generated more views than most major automotive publication websites receive in an entire year. His audience is not reading reviews written by journalists who received the car for free and returned it after a week. They are watching a man buy a wrecked supercar with his own money and fix it with his own hands.
So this oil leak is actually coming from, I don't know what, a position, maybe a position switch?
The authenticity gap between those two types of content is the size of the English Channel. Koenigsegg's decision to reach out to Armstrong is an acknowledgement of this shift. It is a recognition that the people shaping automotive culture are no longer sitting in magazine offices. They are in workshops, in garages, in rented units on industrial estates, building content that millions of people watch because it is real. The brands that embrace this reality, that treat creators as partners rather than threats, will have access to an audience that traditional marketing cannot reach. The brands that resist it, that lock VINs and blacklist owners, and send cease and desist letters to people who customize their own cars, will find themselves increasingly isolated from the very consumers they are trying to attract. Ferrari's annual marketing and sales budget exceeds 700 million euros. They spend that money on advertising, events, brand partnerships, and the maintenance of an image that is designed to make their cars feel untouchable. Matt Armstrong, working from a rented workshop with a camera and a toolbox, reaches more people with a single video than most of that budget accomplishes in a quarter. That is not a criticism of Ferrari's marketing. It is a description of a world that has changed. And the brands that are paying attention, the brands like Koenigsegg that sent a package and a handwritten note to a man who earned their respect by doing the work, are the ones that will define the next era of the automotive industry. What happens after recognition arrives is never the end of the story. It is the beginning of a different kind of pressure. Because once someone like Koenigsegg has seen the work, once the silence is broken, everything changes. The expectations rise. The audience sharpens its focus. And the question is no longer whether the work is good enough to be noticed, but whether it can survive being watched at this level. Matt Armstrong is still in the workshop, still rebuilding what others discard, still documenting every bolt, every failure, every breakthrough in real time. But now, there is a new layer to it all. Awareness from the very top of the industry he has been working around for years. And that leaves one question hanging in the air. When the people who never acknowledged you finally start paying attention, does the story get easier to carry or heavier than ever before?